Well, welcome everyone to the Growing Money with Sean Trace podcast. I have a really interesting guest with me today, and would you like to tell people a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Sean, for welcoming me. My name is Jason Madsen, and I am a money coach. I get to create strategic plans for Christian families, and they get to ignite a vision for what their future can look like by implementing new habits and creating emotional stability so that no matter what's happening around in the bank account or in the world, they can start to break free from that financial cycle of stress.
I love that. Not enough. We see, like, I love reading about resilience and reading about how people deal with challenges in life. One of my favorite books is a book called Grit by Angela Duckworth. And she goes in and talks about how to be emotionally strong. And, you know, we'll read all the time about being emotionally strong for, for, like sports teams and things like that. But we don't always talk about it with money, but it's so important.
Money tends to be a taboo subject for a lot of people, and it's hard to really trust someone to dive into all the nitty-gritty. But once you kind of get over that hurdle, have that third-party objective person explaining, hey, this doesn't have to be the same way. You can get out of this rut. It's going to be hopeful for you.
Yeah, it's so true. You don't have to be in the same rut. You know, sometimes there are patterns that any of us will get in that are not that beneficial. Maybe it's something simple, you got that one burrito that you like to get after work every day, and it's not that bad. It's like, hey, it's not that expensive. It's only $8. Well, $8 every single day after work is going to be a pattern that can be problematic, and it's never going to be just the burrito, because there's always something else that adds up on top of it. Well, it's just going to be, plus a soft drink, and then there's going to be some other habit that's just this one off. But like the success is created with one positive habit at a time. Your downfall is created with one negative action at a time. And so, it's like really becoming aware of what we're doing.
Yeah, and two things come to mind. One is, how many burritos is it going to take for you to start really building the future, right? Saving for retirement. And
Right.
the other is, if you're 1% off in either direction, you could end up miles apart from where you really want to get to.
That is such an interesting concept. I remember reading something like that about an airplane, and if you start off in Los Angeles flying east, and it's just a slight variation, just like that. Here you're going to Atlanta, right there you're going to Boston. It's just the slightest variation in distance or an angle, and you go very different places. And we think that, oh, I'm heading the right way. Well, maybe you're headed in a okay direction, but it might not be where you want to be going,
Right.
I see these old people that are now, and one of the things I love is that as we see people age, we're redefining aging to a degree. And used to be that old people, the idea was they go and they just get old and they get sedentary and they get flabby and stuff. But now, man, you see some really fit older people. I see some 50-year-olds or 60-year-olds that look 50. I see some 70-year-olds that look 50. And it's absolutely fascinating to see, because people are not accepting that you have to allow the trajectory that everyone else says is your trajectory to be your trajectory. You can make changes, especially to your finances, to have a different path.
Yeah, right now I'm reading a book called Choose to Win. It's by Zig Ziglar's son, Tom. And you get to choose your power, whether you want to stay stuck or if you want to choose a different path.
What are some of the things that they say that you can do to make these choices?
A lot of it stems from habits and mindset. And one of the things is understanding that you've practiced your way into it. Well, you're going to have to practice your way out of it. And the only way to do that is by learning new things and creating new habits that you've never done before in order to achieve that growth.
What are some of your habits that you are trying to create to succeed right now?
So consistency is one of those things that it keeps popping up. And I wake up in the morning, I read my Bible, I pray for the kids and the family before I get off to work, and then it's prospecting, it's connecting with humans, it's networking, it's all of the different tasks that lead to something leaning towards getting an appointment, right? The appointment is something that as a coach you want to have consultations, you want to have conversations, and you won't know if the conversation will lead to a consultation until you have that conversation. And then from there, when you have that conversation, it could lead to a consultation. And if it leads to a consultation, well, you can potentially create a client within that consultation. So the consistency is one of the habits that I've been working on the last few months.
That's awesome. One of the things that I like that you're saying right there is like, so your goal is to sign clients, but the fundamentally most important thing is to have more conversations. And it's like at the end of the day, you just have to be talking to people. And, obviously we want to have strategic conversations and talking to the right people, but you still have to talk to people. And it's like there is this step that gets all the other steps going. And it's like, if someone's like, I want to live to 100. Well, get your regular sleep, start eating better, and go to the gym. Like, you start doing those 3 things, and you're gonna be on track to live to 100. Certainly there are going to be things that come up, and you have to do other stuff. But if you can start with those simple habits, you're going to be on the right path.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
Now, let me ask you this. What are some of the mindsets that you're trying to bring into your daily life?
One of the things that I am trying to manifest without sounding woo-woo is going from strict to flexible.
Oh, talk to me about that.
So when we look at things as finite, we tend to limit ourselves. And our mindset and habits, if we say, oh, there's only 24 hours a day, right? That's very limiting. But if we wake up and say, hey, there's 24 hours today that I get to utilize, and some of that is going to be sleep, because that will help, that trajectory to live to 100. But then you wake up and you get to create opportunities that weren't there before. Essentially, moving from strict to flexible is allowing things to take place within the day. And if something doesn't go your way, you're not upset about it. You can continue moving on with your day and fill it with other activity so that you can prepare yourself for success.
I love that. The idea of strict versus flexible as well is something that you hear in different philosophies around the world. I studied judo, and in martial arts, they have a thing where my teacher would say the best way to throw someone is stepping out of the way. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? And he's like, and that is the essential concept of judo, is I am here, I step over here, and you're still traveling to where I was at. And then you fall on your face. And, it's like, it's an art to that. But unless you're flexible, you are going to, and I mean, think about that as well. You see these trees that are just blown in the wind. And, if you are rigid, those trees are the ones that get blown down. But if you can be, flexible in the wind, you can move with it. And there's a power to flexibility that is really important. And it also, like, I'm bad at this. I'm bad at being flexible because I am such a routine person. I get my life done with routines. And my wife is the queen of flexibility. She is the queen of like, let's just go with the flow. And there are powers to both sides. And the thing is though, is that with her, the importance of flexibility is that there's this spontaneity that allows you to have and create opportunity, and that's important. That ability to create that opportunity is so important. I mean, especially if we're talking about finances and business, like, you see entrepreneurs that have started companies in the worst of times, in the worst of seasons, where everything is falling apart, everything is going wrong, but these guys are like, you know what? I think this is a great time to start a company. Let's do it. And then it becomes the next big thing. It's wild like that.
Yeah, and part of the book too, Choose to Win, he's having a conversation with a realtor in 2008, and they're saying, oh man, it's a really bad time to close deals. I just don't think I can do real estate anymore. He's like, are you kidding? Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean by that question? Are you kidding? Like, okay, tell me why you got into it in the first place. Well, I expanded my knowledge. I learned all these new things, and now I close deals. It's like, okay, so now after you told me all of that, and you experienced going through financial crisis yourself, and other people are experiencing the same thing to try to buy homes, are you kidding me?
Right? And that's the thing. Like, we will put ourselves in these boxes and think that we are limited in that moment. But the reality is that there's always opportunity. There's always an opportunity to look and find a way. And this is one of the things that, like, I had a guest that came on and was talking about the abundance mindset. And I was like, what is this? Is this like some woo-woo thing where you sit there and you think about money and it comes to you? And the person was like, I wish it was just like that, but that's not what I mean by abundance mindset. I'm like, well, what do you mean then? And she says, maybe that exists. I can't prove it right now. But what I do know is that when you are open to looking for opportunity everywhere, and everything that comes along might be an opportunity, you're able to see these things that other people might not be able to. I live in Southeast Asia, and we have these really nice suits you can get made for insanely low prices. And the other day, my brother-in-law flew back into town, and he went immediately and got a suit made. And I have this guy. The guy charges $100 for a fully customized, fully fitted suit. $100. That right? Fully fitted suit in the U.S. would be at least $600 to $1,000. I mean, we're starting price for something customized for you. And these are really nice. And so I was sitting there thinking, I looked at my wife and I said, this is a business. This is a great business idea. And she's like, but they have to fly here. I said, no, here's how you do it. You get one person in the US who does great measurements. And then you have all of your fabric samples there. And so you have them numbered and you say, okay, I need a suit in this one. And you make sure that you measure a tiny bit large for each person, a tiny bit bigger. And then when you send it to the US, then you do final measurements there, and then you do fitted there. So you have one person who can take it in to the right size. You have it almost right. And I said, even with the shipping, even with having that one person there, as long as you built it well, you could have, make money to overcome that shipping. That's if you're shipping it fast. If you get enough of them, you could possibly have a person flying back and forth, but that might be prohibitively expensive. And not even that I'm going to do this business, but I was sitting there in the mindset of, but it could work, but you could try it. And, this is something. Now, the question is there enough of demand to fuel that? I don't know. But if you have an abundance mindset, it's the ability to sit there and go, there's opportunities everywhere. And I think that more people need to be thinking like that, because so often we get in this, I hate my job, this is my 9 to 5, I'm not making enough. What else is out there that you could do? What are some of the skills that you're good at? I'd love to hear your take on that.
And before I jump in, two things come to mind. Well, one thing, there's two salespeople, and each of them go different times to Africa, and they say, oh, one of them goes, it says, nobody wears shoes. They're shoe salesmen, right? One of them goes and they say, nobody wears shoes here, there's no opportunity. They fly home. The other one flies over and says, nobody wears shoes here, there's tons of opportunity. So it's all about perspective, right? And so from my perspective, personal story around, what was it again that you had mentioned? Abundance.
The suits? Abundance mindset.
Yeah. So, personal story, I did coaching part-time for 4 years, and I felt like I was limited with my hours because I was working full-time, I was working part-time, I was a dad, right? And so I couldn't balance it all. And right. I pursued a different career path, and it didn't turn out the way I thought it was. So I got back into sales, and after 6 months, that position was terminated. And I said, okay, this is what I'm meant to do now. I know now that this is the Lord, universe, whatever you want to say, telling me, go out, I'm going to provide for you. You are doing a really good work in what you're doing, and everything else will fall into place. Just listen to this.
And you did it. And you're doing it. And that's the flip side too, is sometimes with the opportunity, we need that leap, that step to get things going. And I mean, and it might not be so extreme. It might be that you're driving home today and you look up and you see, or you're looking at your Facebook, you're not driving while looking at your Facebook, but you look at your phone and you see a post where someone that then you trust is like, you know what? I just wanted to share that I had such a great win with my financial planner. You're like, wow, what's a financial planner? Could that person help me? Or, a person's like, hey, I just decided to enroll in a money coach program. And you're like, money coach? Would you mind talking to me about that? What does that look like? Sometimes it takes that willingness to jump into scary waters, into a place where we don't know what the outcome will be. Like, hey, can you talk to me about this? Yeah, that's a little bit scary. Ooh, but I feel this. This podcast was created because I had this itch to know more about personal finance, and this itch to say, you know what? There are other people like me out there that would love to have this information and do not have any idea where to look, and don't know how to do it. So maybe I should make a podcast for them. Those people that are a little bit dumb with personal finance and want to know and want to retire a multimillionaire. I want to build up this podcast and my other podcast and have a media empire. That's my goal. And I want to have all of these things where I'm sharing information, and I've got income funnels where I'm selling online classes, and I'm doing workshops, and I'm teaching people, and I am empowering people, and I am making a difference. You know where that starts? Starts off with making one video today, and getting that video up and posting a reel and sharing it and thanking for the people that are coming on and going and finding new guests. These little steps create the big thing. But again, where it starts is my curiosity and my willingness to go down that rabbit hole, to sit there and go, man, I can do this. I can make this first episode, and I might look stupid. Or you might sit there, it might be like, you know what, I can talk to this person. I just heard this person in line at Starbucks saying, I wish I had more money. That might be the thing that you need to jump in and go, speaking of more money, would you like to have a quick chat? I know that people might do this to you all the time, but I'm a money coach. I'd love to share my favorite tips to make more money. Oh, do you want to do a consultation for us? No. I just want to share some tips. And then I'm going to get my coffee and go on my way. Well, I'd like to know more about those tips. Well, if you'd love to know more, here's my card. Call me sometime. I got to get going. I don't have time right now. Talk to me. And they get home and they're like, I need to call this guy. You don't know, but it takes the courage to try.
So thank you for stepping out in faith and being bold and starting that. I think this is 34, 35. So you're on the right track.
Right? I'm in the right path, man. What are some of the financial tips that you give people that come through your doors?
So a lot of what I coach around is heavily based on Dave Ramsey's methodologies. And I'm sure you've interviewed several of my other fellow coaches that are Ramsey preferred coaches. But the 7 baby steps are really a foundational element to create a systematic process.
That's great.
where people are, I don't know where to start. Okay, well, let's start with step 1, right? How do you build stairs? 1 step at a time.
Right.
Like literally. And as you build on each step, you learn something new about yourself every single time. And you can't move to the next one until you complete the first one.
Right.
And then you start to see the progress. And then you start to see, okay, how do I need to shift my behavior in order to align with what my goals are?
It's so true. And, I think that with the baby steps, people don't realize how important it is to handle one thing at a time. And this is something a guest said to me recently. Like, we have these big, lofty, ambitious goals. We all want to be the person who's, I'm going to be a multimillionaire. Well, do you have your emergency fund? Or you see, I see people, which is really interesting. I have a friend who has a family member that goes around and wears the gold and the earrings and all the bling. And I was like, wow, this person is rich. And they travel everywhere. They take all these big trips. And I was just like, man, this person is living it. And then I found out recently that they are racked with debt. Double mortgages on their house. All of that spending they're doing is not paying down their crippling debt. And I don't know what they have. I think they have, like some savings, but still it's like they're just swimming in debt, and we're talking, couple house worth of debt, and wow, it's very different than what you were expecting and what was anticipated in my mind.
Yeah, I'm sure probably somebody else has mentioned this before, The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Wealth is what you don't see.
Yes.
And people want to flash everything and throw money at the wind and, I've got this, I've got that, but it's all fluff.
Yeah. What as people start getting into the Dave Ramsey steps, as you get a person that comes in at the beginning, how can you help them start to save up their first emergency fund? What are some things that, because maybe they feel daunted by saving up $1,000. What are some things that you can tell them to inspire them to get there?
Every situation is unique, and when you start to hear the reason why they started in the first place, that's a really strong motivator for them to continue to try something different, right? Why do people want to lose weight? Well, they want to feel healthier, they want to live longer, right? Getting to that 100-year-old stage. And it starts with understanding why. Oh, I want to be healthier. A doctor told me, or whomever, right? Maybe it's I just want to feel better about myself.
I love that. And the why is so important because the why always goes deeper than we think. Like, I want to live to be 100. Well, why do you want to live to be 100? Because that's not really a goal in and of itself. Like, I want to experience as much life as I can. Okay, we're getting closer. Why do you want to do that? Because I want to live to be 130. You know, I don't even know if it's possible for people at this time, but why do I want to do that? Because I want to spend as much time as I can on this planet and see and be near my daughter for as long as I can. That's my why. And when I say that, that's my why to be healthy. That's my why to turn down a bad job that would be making me work an 80-hour work week. That is my why to get my finances on track. That is my why to suffer at times when I might be able to be having fun. That's my why to go out and work the extra shift so that I can pay for my daughter to have a piano class. Why? Because I believe that learning some hard things is important for her resilience and teaching her to be a strong adult. That's my why. And if you don't know your why, you're going to be floundering and it's going to be hard. So when someone comes up and says, you know what, that burrito that you've established as your happy place, you can only have that once a week. What is that? All right, well, there has to be a very worthwhile reason for you to do that. You know, they say this, they show this with people that retire, especially men, I believe, that these men retire and they just start dropping like flies. Because when people lose that why that they've had for so long, they lose their reason for being. And, you know, and people start developing health problems. Yeah, I remember my grandpa worked till he was 90-something. He stopped working and boom, he was done. He was gone. And so, you know, you have to have that why, and it has to be a strong why. How do you help people find their whys?
A lot of it comes from just asking deeper questions, but also sharing other stories, personal story, client stories, you know, really getting to the root cause of what's going on in their world, but also kind of asking them, what are your goals? And when you ask the goal, you identify the pain or problem that they're having, then you start to paint a picture for what it could look like if they started to change.
Yeah. You know, I remember this one video about this lady, and she was in her 70s, and she was one of the old flabby 70-year-olds, you know, no muscle tone, and just walked and everything flabs. And she wasn't overweight, she just was, you know, had not a lot of muscle tone. And the doctor looked at her and said, you know, you're going to have mobility issues, because she was walking with, you know, some challenges and feeling stiff. And she hit the gym. And we're not talking like an old people class. She started lifting. And, you know, you can go and find, there are examples of this, but if I think you go and look up like fit 80-year-olds started working out in their 70s, you'll see a video about this lady. She's just super strong, and she looks nothing like she used to. She looks fit. She looks beautiful. And I mean, not that fit is beautiful, but like, she was able to make a change that made her shine brighter, that made her inner beauty come out, because she felt good. And when you feel good, you're going to be a brighter person for the people around you, and the same thing is true with our financial fitness. When we are in a better place financially, we're going to shine a little bit brighter to the people around us because we're not going to feel as down in the dumps.
Yeah, and everybody loves a transformation story, but some people just don't want to put in the hard work to get there.
Yeah. Because it's not always, I'm not going to say it's not easy. People don't have a plan. When you don't have a plan, if I don't have a plan on how to drive down the street, then driving down the street is going to be hard. And if you break down that plan into a series of small steps, think about this, like with my daughter, if I had to teach her, me driving down the street, that ain't that hard. I know how to do that. I've done it a million times now. But if I tell my daughter, okay, honey, you got to drive the car up the street and go get something for me and come back, she's going to be like, what? But I see these videos of kids that grow up in the countryside and they're driving stuff around. Dad taught them, all right, well, what's step one? Well, for me, step one is getting my shoes on. Step two is walking to the elevator. Step three is going down the elevator to the first floor. Step four is walking to the front door, unlocking it. After I unlock it, I need to open it. I need to get my bike out, my car out, whatever you want to get out. You need to go out the gate. You need to close the gate. You got to lock the gate. Then we got to go up the street. Well, hang on, before I go up the street, what do I do? And there's all these series of small steps that might be daunting the first time. How do I open the gate? How do I open the second gate? How do I, work with a deadlock? And all of them are skills that can be learned, but they have to be learned sequentially, and you have to start just taking a chance and saying, you know what, I can learn this. And I think that's one of the things that I love with the Ramsey method, and in any method that breaks things down like that, because you start looking and learning about sections and learning about yourself in different sections, So you start with section, number one, saving. Well, if you want to save, you have to start in that level learning about needs versus wants. You have to start prioritizing. When you start getting to step two and you start tackling that debt, you have to start working something else. Well, what is that? You got to start working your overconsumption. You got to start working on your, ooh, I want that shiny thing. Well, you don't need that shiny thing, but I want it, Well, your wanting it has led to your challenges right now. You don't need it. Talk to me about people as they move into step two and start tackling debt. What's some advice that you give people as they start working towards tackling that debt?
So, something that I see frequently is staying motivated. People that like, oh, I tried, but then retail therapy sets in, right?
Right.
I felt bad about myself, so I'm gonna go buy this, and I don't shame them for that, but what we want to do is tie it back into their why, the reason why they started in the first place. And the other thing is being flexible to understand if something does happen and we are working the plan appropriately, that you can bounce back and forth between the steps. Like it's not a hard and fast thing where, as soon as I hit this, now I'm into this. It's like, no, you may jump back a step. That's just how progress works. It's not going to be this straight up the escalator, path to success. It's going to be messy with a bunch of twists and turns.
100%. Well, I think we kind of tapped on the secret of success right there. I think it's three things. The financial success, at least, is step one, is starting with your why. If you can start with your why, you have this path to move forward. I think step two is then working on your plan, and once you get a plan, you can start figuring things out, whether your plan is the Ramsey method or some other method, having your plan. And then step three is that being flexible and writing your course. I always loved pirate movies. back in the day are, they're going to seek out the treasure, but what is fascinating about those mariners of old was that they journeyed across the world with a simple map and tools that were super advanced, but compared to what we're using, extremely rudimentary. A sextant, where you're pointing at the stars and it tells you where you're at, in relation to the North Star. It's fascinating, and that's just working on up and down. It didn't tell you what your where you were left and right. And it's absolutely fascinating that they were able to accomplish these amazing things. But it came down to their why. Well, why are we journeying across the world to seek out treasure? Because, and it's the same as our whys, because they had a family, because they wanted to have power, to have whatever it might have been. Well, they worked out their why. Well, the next step is always a plan. You're going to be attacking that galleon. Well, you sure better have a plan. First of all, you have to find it. People don't talk about that with pirates. Like, one of the most important things, and one of the biggest things, was that the routes of these galleons was guarded secrets, and they would, dive off, and they would leave in the middle of the night, and they would, sail in ways that was unpredictable, or dates that would be random. And then once you get there, you have to have that degree of flexibility. I'm too tired right now. This is my bedtime. I'm not gonna. Oh, there's a person. Oh, Jeff Bezos is right there. Elon Musk is right there, and they're willing to talk to me and give me some business advice. It'd be really cool, but right now I'm just not feeling it. Wake up and feel it, man. Get out there and do it. Because if you're not flexible, the best laid plans always will hit a snag. There's always something that was going to come up. But if you can work through those steps, if you can work through these different levels of this game, you're going to be able to adapt and get there. Talk to me about what else do you think you need to add to the mix to be financially successful?
So, 3 things that I tend to focus on when it comes to creating that strategic plan. 1, you got to have a budget.
Yeah.
It's super important. 2 is those habits that we were talking about earlier. And 3, that why can sometimes cause different emotions that you're feeling. But understanding that the numbers are just numbers, you attach the emotion to it when you look at it.
Yeah, they are just numbers. There is no, right? The emotion is your thing. Because, again, money is a tool. And this is something that came up in my last episode, that we think about money as this thing. And it's this lusted after thing, this desired thing. I mean, you could be like, it could be any type of tool you want. It could be a trowel, a little thing they use to put down the cement between bricks. Yeah, you can have a little triangular trowel and you're putting down cement for the bricks. You know what I mean? But it's just a tool, and like anything, you could take, or a hammer. I can take a hammer and build a house. I can also take that hammer and tear something down. It's just how you use it. But where the emotion comes was, maybe your dad was a carpenter. And so when you see that hammer, you've got all of these positive memories. Or maybe your dad was a carpenter with anger problems. So when you see that hammer, suddenly this fear lights up with you. Oh no, am I going to get in trouble? Is dad going to yell at me? And the power is starting to look at, again, what are those money stories that you're telling yourself? And what are your internal biases that are coming up around that? Did you come from a family that just never had enough? And so every time you get money, you're afraid that it's never going to come again. So either you're money vigilant and you're going and saving it, or maybe you're money worship and you're just like, I need to go there. Maybe you're money status and you go buy all this stuff. You never know where a lot of that early programming came. But if you can start going, wow, that is my pattern, and that is not what I want. I used to be money avoidant, and now I'm trying to pull in the positives of money vigilance. And yesterday I went with my daughter and deposited some money in the bank. And she's like, why did you go put the money in the bank? Are we saving up for something? I'm like, yeah, we're saving for an emergency fund. That is so that in case, why do we need an emergency fund? I was like, oh, I'm so glad you asked. Because if there ever is a problem or something happens, then we can deal with it. Then we can, I have family in both Asheville, North Carolina, and I also have family in Los Angeles. And right now, 2 places that have been absolutely hammered by natural disasters. And so we were talking about that. And she said, wow, I understand why you need an emergency fund. And I said, yeah, if you need to go and get a hotel, if you need to go and, need to get food, and, hopefully you never need to use it, but if it's there or if it's not there, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, and I just read there's probably over 300,000 people that are affected, and where do they go?
Right?
Right? You can't have all of the hotels just offering for free, or anybody that owns an Airbnb. It's like, where do we put 300,000 people in a sea of already 24 million people that live in LA? It's crazy.
It is. And I think the powerful thing is a reminder that you never know what could happen. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. But again, I think if you have a plan, you can prepare. What was it? Prepare for the worst and hope for the best was something that I once read, and I think is such a beautiful sentiment because, if you prepare for the worst, then when that bad stuff comes, you're ready. Maybe you're not ready, but you have a little bit of safety net, and then if you hope for the best, then if something good comes, then wow, isn't that great? My friend used to work special forces, and he worked special forces for the helicopters that supported the Navy SEALs. And what he would tell me is that he would remember they would be on location, and the special forces team would arrive, and they would tape out on the ground the shape of the building, and then they would walk through it. They would have their plan, and then they would plan for every last problem that could happen, every last thing that could go wrong. And then when it did, they were ready for it. And it wasn't they didn't catastrophize. They were like, this is the end of the world. No, this is simply another problem which we were prepared for. And you can't minimize the emotional challenges that are still going to happen when you get a flat tire. Man, I'm just sitting there going, I didn't need to spend $400 on a new set of tires because tires are not cheap anymore. It used to be like, go buy a cheap set of tires. Now, $500, $600, $1,000, whatever it is that your car requires, it's not cheap. But again, if you prepare for that, it almost is a win. I had built up my emergency fund, and then I told, someone that I was working with, a money coach, you know what, I'm so frustrated because I built up my emergency fund, and then bam, I, had this expending that came up, and it's not where it should have been, and then I'm beating myself up for getting in this situation. My friend's like, no, stop. And I was like, what are you talking about? They were like, your emergency fund saved you in an emergency. And I said, yeah, but now I got to save back up. And they're like, so? That was the purpose of having it. Your purpose of having it was to save you in emergencies. So don't you think that is the thing that you should be focusing on. And I was like, hey, it was a win. It was a win to have it, and a win for it to take that hit. And it was a mindset shift.
It did exactly what it needed to when you needed it. It's like you hit turbulence in an airplane. They go through the safety video, and as the masks drop down to give you that oxygen, it's like, how many times has that happened, really? And
Right.
when it does happen, hey, it's there. We were prepared for whatever may come. So I'm glad that it was useful in that period of time, and I'm glad that the coach was able to say, hey, stop thinking that way. It's okay. And it's fine to build up, because otherwise people will just rely on credit cards, and that's their plan.
Yeah.
They don't have any other plan.
Right. If you could go back in time and give yourself one bit of financial advice, what would that be?
The first thing that comes to mind is I would have pursued going into coaching a lot sooner.
Right.
But if I could go back in time, I also probably would have hired a financial coach sooner.
I love that.
Not to sound self-serving, but
That's the whole point. It's like, it's good financial advice for everyone. And I think that you have to be, if you want to help other people, you have to be a little bit self-serving in the beginning. Because if you can't help yourself, I was talking about this in altruism with my last guest. And, we were talking about the power of giving and the power of sharing. And I remember, when I was a kid, and we would sit there and they would pass the money plate down the aisle. And, I was only able to give $1 because that's all I had. But I looked at the person next to me, and he was one of the influential members of our church. And he would always put like $100 in every week. That was what he gave. And I was just like beating myself up for not being able to give that. My dad looked at me and he's like, you're a kid. It's okay. It's okay. And I was like, well, why is he able to give so much? And my dad's like, because he nourished his money. He gardened and he tended that area of his life. And on the flip side, God was good to him. And he's sharing that with other people around him. But he took care of himself. He was meticulous with his finances, and he handled his finances, and he also knew that he had the finances in place so he could give that. And it wasn't taking away from the other areas of his life, and his money was still out there growing and working. But then he was able to do that to give back. And there's the beauty of, if you're self-serving a little bit and you're going to see that financial planner, well, then you're going to have more down the road to help others with,
your story reminds me of a parable Jesus told, right? As the money comes down the pew and you put your $1 in, the other person puts 100. It's like, why compare your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 10 or chapter 20?
Right.
But also, you gave what you could, just like the woman gave the 2 coins and that's what she could. And yet she gave more than the other, even though the dollar currency amount was so much greater. She gave more.
Yeah. And the power is that, and if you want to give even more, you have the ability to do it. But you got to care for yourself. It's like in the airplane, going back to the airplane or the boat, it's like you see in the airplane videos, like they're like, Mom, put your oxygen mask on before your child. Why? Because if you pass out from a lack of oxygen, you ain't helping anyone. If you don't have your life vest on, you're not helping anyone. You need to take care of yourself. And again, that was the motivation for this podcast. When I sat there and thought about, I want to prepare my daughter so that she doesn't get the financial challenges that I've had. Well, I sure as heck have to right my ship first. I've got to learn as much as I can and be as self-serving as I can so I can be in a better place. I've been binge watching Coursera courses, and I'm just adding certificates to my LinkedIn like crazy. And my brother-in-law saw it. He's like, dude, you are crushing it right now. And he's like, what's your motivation? And I was like, that's my why. Because I'm trying to get into a better place financially. I'm trying to add all these things to my wheelhouse. So whether it's in video production, it's project management, or whatever, or coaching, whatever I'm doing, I have a tool set that I can help more people. And, every single day, are you improving? Are you getting better?
Think of that ripple effect that you're going to have because of everything you're doing now and the legacy that you're going to leave for your daughter. It's going to be incredible.